Thank you very much for that background conversation. Since you just I'm talking, let me shift that question to Father Dufay, since he's your professor of moral theology, even though it's kind of loaded. Do you remember the question, Father Dufay?
Maybe we can break it down. You asked about what Africa remembers of Pope Francis, and then positive, like in a good light, and then the ones that were like troublesome points or issues of challenge. So we can just start from there. What Africa remembers of Pope Francis.
You are muted, Father.
Yeah, thank you. The nature, quality, and quantity of closeness of Pope Francis to the people has been so touching, even to the African people. I went to his tomb just a few days after his funeral, and I could see a lot of people thronging there, coming there to pray, visiting the tomb. And I saw also a lot of Africans devoted. I just want to skip immediately to that slippery ground of that document, Fiducia Supplicans, which was, I can say, the largesse, the largeness of the heart of Pope Francis that pushed him to look at all the elements or people who live in the peripheries. He talked about the church as the field hospital. In a field hospital, you don't determine which patients come in and which don't come in. Actually, when you admit all the patients in the field hospital, you can now send them to various departments. Somebody who has a cardiac problem goes to the cardiac center. Somebody who has, let's say, liver problem, you distinguish at that level. But I think what he was pointing out immediately was the fact that we are all sinners. We are all sinners in need of God's mercy. A topic came up on discussion, and I asked somebody whether when Jesus declared the sins of the woman who was caught in adultery forgiven, whether Jesus used the word adultery. Jesus did not call the name of the sin. He just freed the woman, and that was enough, and cautioned her not to sin again. The problem is, let me just say, Pope Leo XIV is a canonist, and I'm very convinced that he will know that canonical terms are open, or every term is open to interpretation. When a canonist voices out a word, he knows that that word can be understood differently by different people. So there is need to be dogmatic in that level. I am a moralist. When a moralist says a word for the neighbor, he has to be very careful about his use of the word, because in moral terms, either a thing is true or it is not true. Either a thing is bad or it is not bad. We might go into trying to check out the degree of badness or the degree of goodness of a thing, but sometimes just the first definition of an act already gives you the moral content. The way I read Fiducia Supplicans is, I read the heart of a father who wanted to reach to all the children, but he used terms which some children would not like to hear. Just in our context, for example, in Africa, calling a particular word becomes a taboo, not to talk about the particular act itself. Another level which I personally expected Pope Francis to reach was to really say that these are people who want to repent, who want to change from their way of life. But the way the document presented it was as if these are people who are asking for a blessing, full stop. And so our interpretation of some people is they are asking that that union be blessed and that they remain inside that union, which automatically goes against the doctrine of the church. And so my understanding personally was, if people come to me and they are asking whether they come as a pair or as singles, and they're telling me, Father, help me to come out of this mud with a blessing. Then the words of my blessing will reflect what I want done, what I'm calling God to do on them. I won't be calling God to come into a situation which is morally unacceptable. I would expect him, I would be calling him to come and help somebody out of the situation. I am working in a confessional, which means that we face all types of vulnerability. And I won't be telling you this particular sins that we face, but I have listened to all the sins that can be committed in the world. I can say that. And when you are inside the confessional and think about your own self, your own shortcomings, that alone is enough to change your language, the way you approach people. Somebody rushes to you in a hospital, for example, and is complaining. And if you, the doctor, you are sick, don't think about your sickness. You have to bracket your sickness and attend to the patient because you are there for that patient. And if you succeed to heal that patient, you may go back suffering with your own sickness, but you have done what your profession demands. So, as a final word, I would say that the words of fiducia supplicans needed to be expanded a little. I'm not challenging the Pope, but I think for the sake of the layperson or for people who would have loved to really hear the doctrine of the church, the words needed to be canonically, dogmatically, and morally clear. And of course, pastorally.
Yeah, thank you very much, Father Dufe, for that explanation, because that particular document raised a lot of eyebrows, and people asked serious and in-depth questions about the orientation that the church was going to take, if the church had already changed its position on the sanctity of marriage. But the bishops of Africa got a dispensation. I don't know if Father Neba wants to chime in on this, to share his opinion on this.